You know, there are some stories in human history that just change everything. And then there's the story of Rome. It's this epic, 2,000-year-long journey that starts in a tiny city and ends up shaping the very world we live in today in ways you probably don't even think about.
And that brings us to something you've probably heard before. People love to make this comparison, right? For years, historians and politicians have drawn this direct line from the ancient superpower to modern ones. It's a pretty bold claim, and honestly, it really gets you thinking.
So, if we want to get a handle on our own world, maybe even see what's coming next, we've got to look back. What can this ancient civilization really teach us about power, about ambition, and about all the big forces that make or break a nation? So let's do it. Let's dive in, right at the beginning.
Okay, so first things first. Our story doesn't kick off with emperors and all that. Nope. It actually starts with a rebellion against kings. We're jumping way back to a time when the Romans decided they'd had enough, kicked out their monarch, and built something that was, for its time, completely revolutionary: a republic.
And look, this was a huge deal. Think about it. Power wasn't about who your dad was anymore. It was given by the people to officials they elected to a Senate. This wasn't just some new political theory. It was like a machine designed to channel the ambition of an entire society. And boy, did it work. It became the engine that powered Rome's unbelievable growth.
But check this out. This did not happen overnight, not even close. This was a slow, tough, and honestly pretty brutal grind that went on for centuries. From its mythical beginnings, Rome just fought and fought. You have the legendary Punic Wars against their arch-rival Carthage, and by the time that was all over, Rome wasn't just some local player. They were the undisputed boss of the whole Mediterranean.
But here's the crazy part, the big irony. The very thing that made the Republic a superpower is also what destroyed it. I mean, the system was built to run a city. It just couldn't handle this gigantic, sprawling territory with all these different cultures. And that tension, well, that's what leads us to one of the biggest turning points in all of history. The Republic dies, and the Empire is born.
And that brings us to Augustus, Julius Caesar's heir, the very first Roman emperor. He said it best himself. This quote just perfectly sums up the promise of this new age. After 100 years of bloody civil war, the deal was pretty simple. One guy gets all the power, and in return, you get peace, you get stability, and you get a total transformation of the capital. So that was the trade-off. You had the Republic, with its laws and its Senate full of citizens. That was gone. Now you had an empire, run by whatever one man wanted. Romans weren't citizens governing themselves anymore. They were subjects.
And you know what? For 200 years, it actually worked. This period, the famous Pax Romana, the Roman peace, was the empire's golden age. At its height, it ruled over something like 65 million people. That is a huge chunk of the entire world's population at the time, all living under one government.
But we all know how these stories go. Nothing lasts forever. The Roman Empire was just too big, too complex. It was impossible to keep it all together. And when we talk about the fall of Rome, it's not like one day it was just gone. No, it was this long, slow unraveling that took centuries.
So, what happened? How did it all fall apart? Well, there's no easy answer. It wasn't just one thing. It was basically a perfect storm. You had endless political chaos, a whole century of assassinations and civil wars. The economy was a mess, with insane inflation. At the same time, the borders were getting hammered by constant invasions. Things got so bad that they literally had to split the empire in two just to try and manage it all. It was just one crisis after another.
But wait, the story isn't over. Not by a long shot. Because while the western half of the empire was crumbling in the 5th century, the eastern half, well, it was doing just fine. In fact, it was thriving. From its shiny new capital, Constantinople, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, kept the Roman legacy alive for another 1,000 years.
So get this, even after the city of Rome itself fell, the idea of Rome was still incredibly powerful. So let's fast forward a bit. Let's look at what happened after the final curtain fell, and really dig into why we're still, in so many ways, living in a world that the Romans built.
1453. That's the date. That's when the story really finally comes to an end. When the Ottoman cannons blasted through the walls of Constantinople, that was it. The very last piece of the Roman state was gone. Think about that. A political power that had existed, in one form or another, for more than 2,000 years. Just gone.
But even when it was gone, its ghost was everywhere. And I mean that. Roman law is the foundation for a ton of legal systems we use today.
Their language, Latin, it didn't just disappear. It evolved into Spanish, French, and Italian. Their engineering, the aqueducts, the roads, is still, in some places, the bedrock of modern Europe. And maybe the biggest idea of all, the Republic, that idea of a government for the people, wow, that would echo through history and inspire revolutions for centuries.
And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. The whole story of Rome, from a scrappy republic to a massive empire, to its long, slow decline, it's like a roadmap for how history works, for these big cycles of rise and fall. So when you look at the world today, you just have to wonder, what lessons from Rome's incredible 2,000-year journey should we be thinking about right now?